what is belonging? It's like not being the best. It's not even being like the most incredible, most accomplished person. It's having a role. It's knowing your role. And I think the problem is that most people are in the world today and they don't feel this basic sense of belonging. Belonging is a core human need, yet people don't feel it every day. And often leaders don't really know how to create that sense of belonging at work. So that's really what I see as my role.
Hello and welcome to today's version of the Keynote Curators Podcast. I'm Seth Deckman, your Keynote Curator, and today we're going to be talking about workplace belonging, human connection, and the future of work with our guest, Adam Smiley Poswolsky. His TED Talk on the power of human connection has garnered over 2 million views. That's right, 2 million views. For our audience, thanks for joining us. We're excited you're here. And if you enjoy the conversation and content like this, please like us, love us, subscribe, and share. It helps us bring you more content and incredible speakers like Adam. Adam Smiley Poswolsky, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Seth. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me today.
You're very welcome. We are excited to have you. I want to just start things off right away, kick it off by talking about, what was it that inspired you to focus your career on workplace belonging and human connection?
Yeah, I think for me, it's a combination of my kind of personal story and my own journey, and then a little bit of what's happening in the world and kind of paying attention to what people need. I think that's the best way to run a speaking business, or frankly, any business, right? You take yourself and you match it with something that people actually need. You're solving a problem. So for me, as a young kid, I was picked on a lot. I didn't have like a ton of friends, or I was just kind of like weird. You and I talk about summer camp, but that was one of the first places where I was like, oh, it's cool to be weird. Like the coolest kids are weird. The coolest kids are the other people being picked on. Like, actually the coolest women are the people that are also like kind of different, like all of this stuff, which is like not what you kind of get growing up in a big city. I grew up in Cambridge, Massachusetts, went to a big public high school, over 2,000 kids. And one of my earliest experiences of feeling kind of a sense of belonging was the first year of high school, freshman year. I wanted to play a sport. We're on a podcast, but those of you that have ever known me, I'm not that big of a guy. So like football is not going to happen. Soccer, our soccer team's like the best team in the state. Like people try out and get recruited or whatever. So I went out for one of the only sports left, which was, people out there maybe can guess, cross country, right? I didn't even know what the sport was. I assumed it was skiing, but it's actually running. You just go run a few miles, right? Or run hill workouts. So a couple of weeks into practice, my coach, who's this hard-nosed Boston guy, I'm like doing the hill workout. I'm smiling, kind of having fun, being like, wow, exercise. I'm doing a sport after school. I'm so cool. And my coach,
right? Like, you're happy to be there.
I'm just happy to participate. I'm just happy I'm doing something at 3:00 on a Tuesday, right? Like I wanted to play a sport. They're going to give me the jersey. Oh my gosh, it says Cambridge on it, like with Adidas, right? Like cool. And my coach is like this hard-nosed Boston guy. He just starts screaming at me, like, what the hell are you doing smiling, kid? Stop smiling. Stop puking, kid. Stop puking. And after that, the team nicknamed me Smiley. I was like the slowest and shortest kid on the team. I like didn't place at any of our races. Like I wasn't actually good, but I was like Smiley, and I get everyone pumped up. I do like, we get in the huddle before a race, and I'd be like, all right, everybody, we're going to have the best race ever. Cambridge represent on 3. Let's go. And I ended up running all 4 years of cross country, indoor and outdoor track. So 12 seasons. I became captain my senior year. I was still one of like the slowest kids on the team, but I had a role to play.
But you were consistent.
And I belonged. And that was my first experience. Like, what is belonging? It's like not being the best. It's not even being like the most incredible, most accomplished person. It's having a role. It's knowing your role. And I think the problem is that most people go out, are in the world today, and they don't feel this basic sense of belonging. Like they don't feel that way when they go to work. They maybe don't even feel that way in their community or in their life. And the data supports that, right? 50% of Americans are lonely. 40% of employees don't trust their colleagues. 40% don't trust their coworkers. I've seen recent data that shows 80% of employees feel a degree of loneliness at work. And we've seen this with the shift to hybrid and people not meeting their colleagues or their manager or their boss anymore. So realizing that, hey, like this is a major issue that people are facing. Belonging is a core human need, yet people don't feel it every day. And often leaders don't really know how to create that sense of belonging at work. So that's really what I see as my role these days.
No, it's a fantastic origin story, and it just flows so naturally. There's so many things to, dice and slice in what you said. I don't know how I'm going to connect this idea of fight or flight, but we talk about fight or flight, and you can talk about grit or survival or overcoming obstacles and the natural thing of that. But in the sociological, even anthropological, the origins of humans, we were hunters and gatherers. Let's just deduce that meant a couple of us mammals, Homo sapiens, were kind of hanging out, doing something together, i.e. belonging. I just want to underscore, I too participated in high school sports, and I was not all county, all state. I wasn't even captain, but some of the greatest memories, either at camp or in my sports world, was, I was last doubles on a very good tennis team. I don't think I provided a lot of points into our production, if you will. But it was just such a great memory for me, and my friends, my nearest and dearest friends, were both number one and number two singles, and they were very encouraging. And to this day, I still play with them, and it's still such a great memory. Could you go a little bit further, though? Let's tie in a little bit of that science and the data and whatever reports out there that you're aware of in the work that you've done. I know you've worked with Google and Apple, and the benefit, the payoff of this sense of belonging, having an atmosphere and a culture where that's something that leadership makes it an important aspect of the work culture.
Yeah, let's start with kind of the human data, like the actual just science of why this matters in life, and then we'll go to the business data, because I think that that's super important. Just so people know, like, it's not like, oh, loneliness, wouldn't it be nice if people had more friends? Loneliness is dangerous to your health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. It's correlated with increased risk of stress.
Say that again, Smiley.
Loneliness is as dangerous to your health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. So it literally can kill people. It's correlated with increased risk of stress, anxiety, depression. And then there's studies that show that the most important factor in determining a healthy life, it's not how much money you have, it's the quality of your relationships. Like Harvard did a study that was tracking people's health over the years. They tracked from people from all the way from college through adulthood, all the way to their death. And they found that the healthiest people at the age of 80 had the healthiest relationships at the age of 50. So this is just like why it matters on a human level. But I think it's really important to also kind of talk about the business bottom line costs. So disconnected employees, double the sick days, more missed days at work, 45% lower productivity, lower quality of work, higher risk of turnover. They cost their employers in the United States alone $406 billion per year in lost productivity. And on the flip side, employees have high levels of belonging, more resilience, better well-being, more personal growth, 92% more professional growth, 56% increase in their job performance, 18 times more promotions, double the raises, 170% increase in employer promoter score, like how likely you are to recommend your job.
Right.
And
retention,
annual savings,
I'm sure.
Annual savings of $52 million a year for a company. So this is a bottom line business issue. I think a lot of times people think of belonging or connection as soft. Like, we'll take care of that after we do budgeting and marketing and have about innovation and strategy. And all those things are super important for a business. But this is also a bottom line issue. Like, you will not keep your people long enough to get the growth, to get the change, to get the innovation, to launch new products, to win in your category if they don't feel a sense of belonging. They'll be out the door, or they just will be at home working, but not actually getting anything done. Yeah. Not actually producing, not actually innovating.
All those characteristics, the benefits, the pros that optimize this from a sense of belonging don't mean anything if you're not retaining your people, if there's no retention. So I think that is a a baseline kind of piece to it. And I think you touched on something, you must be reading my mind, Smiley, but this soft or this stigma around, oh, we'll take care of that afterwards. And I was, we had talked a little bit before this recording about some of the other guests and episodes and some of frankly, the content that we're putting out. And there's a couple of speakers. There's been a common through line, and I'll amalgamate a couple of them. Some have coached gold medal teams, the Dutch female field hockey team. Some have coached NBA coaches. So I'm talking about speakers and researchers that are top performers. And it's not only a sense of belonging, maybe I'll take it a little bit further, that they feel loved, that there's actually true, genuine caring. Because that guy in Boston who's saying, come on, you got to go wicked harder and you got to puke, I mean, underneath that, he saw that you could do more. Let's take the generous approach. He saw that there was more that you can improve on. The largest room in the house is room for improvement. And when you're an elite performer, like an Olympian that's at the gold medal level and you're in real rarefied air, you need to be pushed. But you're willing to be pushed if you feel that there's genuine care and concern, like love. And it's no different in the workforce. It's no different in friendships. What
Exactly.
say you to that, Smiley?
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that. I mean, we're recording. It's a couple of days after, the Super Bowl. And I don't know if you're a football fan or who your team is, but I was reading an article in ESPN yesterday about Nick Sirianni, the coach of the Eagles, right? The Eagles just upset the Chiefs. And this article is about how he's a player's coach. He writes individual handwritten letters to his players at kind of random times and puts them in their locker room. And the letters are not just like, you're doing a great job, thanks for being part of the team, great work this season. It's something personal, something he's noticed, something about their growth, something about something that happened off the field, something about their kids or something they're going through. And the players talk about how these letters are some of the most impactful things. One player, they keep them in their bags when they go travel, like in their bags to look at before a game. And like he gets to know them on such a deep level where, he's talking about how one player was having fertility issues, and talking about that. Or one person was dealing with someone in their family struggling with cancer, and like all of these types of things that, we maybe don't think that a coach or a leader needs to pay attention to because it's off the field stuff. But that's how these players develop a sense of trust with him. And that's why they perform so well. So I think that is a huge piece of this performance thing, is developing that human connection. And it's what happens when no one's looking. I think a lot of times, people think of connection in the workplace as kind of like, oh, the annual retreat, super important. Right. Or like the performance review, super important. Or like, okay, we're doing team building today. Like, here we go. Like team building, wah. It's actually just what you do in your normal day-to-day meetings and one-on-ones and interactions when you're starting that with like, how's your weekend? What's going on in your life? Oh, you mentioned your 4-year-old was sick. Are they feeling better? How's your mom doing? Like, oh, I heard, something was happening at home. Like whatever that stuff is, like that's what builds the relationship so that annual retreat can be successful. So that when it comes time to have these big kind of launches, they go well. It's about what you do when no one is looking.
That is a perfect segue to talk about the future of work. Remote work is here to stay in whatever form or iteration. There's kind of infinite blends of it. A couple of days in person, a couple of days, virtual, and everything in between. And then you can talk about how each generation relates to that, and you could really, really dig in. My feeling is, and I can acknowledge and recognize I'm probably a little bit more biased. I'm a full Xer. I'm not on the cusp of either generation. I love in person. And the reason is that, when you talked about the coach of the Philadelphia Eagles, now the Super Bowl champions, I'm originally a New York Giant fan and also a Denver Bronco fan, NFC, AFC. But that is beautiful. And that's the magic of what happens in person, because if you're hearing as the head coach of an NFL team that's important, business organization at the end of the day, and somebody on your team is struggling with fertility, or a family member has cancer, like you mentioned, or whatever it may be, that can happen remotely, but in person, it has a higher likelihood. But in addition, Smiley, the magic of the water cooler, the parking lot, waiting for the elevator, walking to lunch. And I say to Smiley, I say, hey, Billy down the hall, he seemed a little bit off. Is that just me, or is there actually something there? You're more connected with him. Would you check in, and then can we reconnect about that? That kind of stuff, while spreadsheets or getting the right copy out, or a presentation or a product launch, are all equally important. If you don't have that connection and that belonging and that concern and that love in the space, I don't care. You can tell me about the future of work. It's still not going to move forward with optimal behaviors. So share your thoughts on that.
Nothing will ever replace in person. And especially in the times that we live in. And I'm thinking specifically about the rapid rise and adoption of AI. And these tools are incredibly powerful, right? I'm sure you use ChatGPT or Perplexity or every single day, Claude, whatever it is, these tools, and they're only getting even better, right? So this is part of how we work, how we live, not going away. In that world, though, if we lose the human eye contact, the kind of the physical presence, the being around other people, the remembering why we do things, I think we're really in trouble, both in terms of business and frankly, just society in general.
Yeah.
But it's not as simple as saying, because of that, you actually physically need to be in our office 5 days a week. And the reason is that all too often, what happens is that when companies say return to office no matter what, and I understand why they say that, right? I'm an in-person, I wrote 2 books about in-person connection. I wrote a book about friendship. I love it. The problem is that if they do say that and someone is like, well, okay, either I have to move my family to come closer to this office, which is just financially might be really hard or logistically hard, or then they have to worry about what their kids are in school. Okay, so then I move to this being close to the office. I commute 30 minutes, right? I'm sitting in traffic, or I'm getting on the bus or the subway, the metro, whatever it is. I finally get to my desk. And then my boss, who is like, you need to be here, isn't there. Because they're off on meetings, or they're working from home, or they're working from Atlanta, or and then everyone that is there has their noise canceling Quiet Comfort Bose headphones on and is on wall-to-wall Teams or Zoom meetings all day long. It's like, wait a second, why did I just sit in traffic? Why did I not have 30 minutes more this morning with my daughter to have breakfast or to exercise this morning? I could have probably been more productive not sitting in traffic. So it's a yes and my whole thing is, it's hybrid is not a policy. It's not the amount of days a week in the office, although that's important to align on so that people are there at the same time. It's what's happening when people are together. It's not a policy, it's a purpose. So that when people are in person together, we're having time for human connection and brainstorming and collaboration, and the people are on the same team, or hopefully on similar days, and we're doing a lunch and we're doing an idea share, and we're doing feedback, and we're having an outside speaker, or we're having an event. But also, we don't lose human connection when people are virtual. It's like, oh, it's your remote day. Good luck. See ya. See you in a month. Like, we'll never have to talk to you again because you're remote. I'm not going to do time for connection on a Zoom call. Like, we should build that in regardless of where people are working from. So it's all about hybrid is the opportunity for connection all of the time.
Yeah.
That's my whole thing. So it's not enough to just say 5 days a week in person. It's about making sure that we're intentional when people come together.
Yeah, I just want to say, for our listeners out there, if you love this kind of content, I love this kind of content. That was really rich. Smiley, please join us, comment. How are you doing at work? Are you hybrid, remote, full-time back to the office? Have you had to move? Have you had to modify your kid's schedule, your partner's schedule, whatever it is? This is really a rich conversation. Like us, love us, subscribe. We can continue to bring this kind of great content. Smiley, bring it back to summer camp, because everything goes back to summer camp. I've heard the term, I wish I coined it myself, but campfires in cyberspace. When the internet, first came out, I think it was Dr. Thornburg or something. I was in my former life, I was a teacher for many years, and there was campfire in cyberspace where it's the water cooler, or it's the literal campfire at summer camp where you get to tell stories and you get to fantasize and the imagination runs wild, or you're marshmallows and you're next to a bunkmate or somebody who isn't in your bunk or isn't in your age group. And that kind of magic, that's where that spark happens. But in the workplace, back to that stigma, or it's all, we'll take care of belonging after we handle all that stuff. Let's face it, it's a more complex, more complicated time we live in. And it requires a little bit more matter-of-fact awareness around, with all the apparatus, all the distractions, all the disconnections and connections in the world. Leaders, supervisors, managers, call them what you want. They have to bring that awareness and that consciousness to, if you're bringing people in, that it's not like, oh, we're going to be a conference services team and you come into the office, so I'm going to make this Lollapalooza event for you. But you do have to artfully integrate it in, systematize it in a way where it's attractive, appealing. It's not overdone like it's bowling night or something, but you know what I'm saying?
It has to be intentional. I think that's the biggest thing. Like, you actually have to design for human connection. And it's not enough to just say like, oh, it's networking time. So that's like kind of the usual way people handle this. It's like, this is a break, right? So like, if you and I look at conference agendas every day, and it'll say break, networking. And it's like, okay, yes, like you and I are both extroverted people that can probably talk to almost anyone about almost anything, but not everyone is like that.
Yeah.
And I think what you're seeing now is that companies and conferences that are really thinking about this more creatively are designing activities to bring people in. And not everyone has to love the same thing, and not everyone's going to be excited about the same thing, but there's a multitude of options for different people to connect around interests, ideas, whatever it is, whatever experiences. I think you're seeing that a lot, especially if you're only getting your team together once a year, twice a year, right? Once a quarter. It used to be that people would see each other almost daily, right? If people are only seeing each other, many of the events I speak at, people are like, I haven't seen this person in 2 years, or they maybe haven't met them yet. That has to be, and if you just only go with content and it's just back-to-back content, every single presentation, and not have the time for connection, those interactive experiences, whether it's speakers, whether it's facilitated activities, things that people haven't seen before, creating the time for the unexpected, seeing your leader do something they've never done before, whether it's karaoke or doing something silly or playing or trying something different or getting on stage, whatever it is, those are the opportunities that people talk about the rest of the year.
Yeah. And right. So the intentionality around it, and then have it, there has to be consistency to it. Right?
Consistency is key.
Right. Like ongoing, and, it's like you almost, hey, I don't need to plan connection, but you kind of do.
Has to go in the calendar. There's a lot of research around that, like the near exposure effect. Like the more that you see someone, the more that there's a cadence. This is why people, have a book club, right? It's like, oh, meeting monthly, and I got to read the book, and I'm going to Susan's house, and then we're going to Amanda's house, because it's like, you're looking forward to it. It's on the calendar. It's not a one-off. If it's a one-off, it's like, maybe we'll hang out. If it's a book club, you're like, I'll see you every week. So when it's kind of like this thing that's a series and it's ongoing. Yeah. And then the other thing I think that's really important, because people sometimes feel overwhelmed by connection, right? And they're like, oh, I would do a lot of things that you say, Smiley, I just don't have time.
Yeah.
And that's fair. Like I feel that we're in this wall-to-wall Zoom meeting kind of world. And I always say, to the extent that you can, incorporate connection into the things that you're already doing. They're already on the calendar. They're already scheduled. They're already planned. So if you can take that 1 minute, 5 minutes would be great. 10 minutes, amazing. Even if it's 1 minute at the start of a meeting to do that check-in. Is anything on your mind? Does somebody want to share? Has anything come up for you? Didn't you learn anything while we were working on this project? Or anyone have anything that they want to get off their chest? Whatever it is, those moments are so essential because you're building connection, and it's not like we have to schedule another thing or another meeting.
Right.
It's like nobody has time for that. And the other thing I think leaders can do that's really important, again, this does require a little time blocking, but just office hours. Being available for people to talk about, ask questions, to come without an agenda, just to chat, even just knowing that you have those office hours.
Right.
They feel a connection, even if they never take you up on it or they don't come Thursday at
just
10
the
a.m.
existence of it.
The existence makes you accessible, makes you more transparent, makes you feel like you are open to connection and communication and collaboration.
Yeah. And one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this, not only because this is your jam, this is your wheelhouse, but there was I don't know how recent it was, but you did post about hybrid work on LinkedIn. And when in my preparation for this, I was like, I just want to get as much out of you on this, because I know this is part of what you impart in your keynotes, and you're very busy and very active across all industries, all sizes of audiences, and all over the world, really. Talk to us a little bit about what's been working that you're excited about, how the sands have shifted and what's resonating for audiences. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So my biggest thing that I think speakers miss that is kind of like pretty obvious, maybe given what I speak about, is that my job is to make sure that the audience feels something and has an action plan, and that it's about them. It's about them. And this should be so obvious. Like, literally what we get paid to do is go into a room of people at their event and make them feel something or teach them something or give them an experience. Yet I see so many speakers that kind of miss this. And the biggest thing that has worked for me, and I've learned this from several mentors of mine, is to do deep client interviews prior to my talk. And I don't mean with kind of the client sponsor, or the person who's running the event, or the person who's bringing me in. I mean with 3 or 4 or 5 people that are going to be in the room on the day that I speak. And so I'll get on a call with those folks, and I'm asking them, how do you build connection on your team, right? What's working? What are you struggling with? How are you navigating hybrid? Just like we talked about.
Right.
But what's happening, how are you engaging Gen Zers and 25-year-olds that have different expectations about how fast things should be happening, right? The swipe right generation, right? How are you making sure the swipe right generation, my generation, which is the elder millennials, right? The Oregon Trails generation, the Gen Xers and the baby boomers are all happy. What's working? What isn't? What have you tried that's new? What are you struggling with? How are you thinking about AI? But it's not that I'm bringing in like the outside case studies. It's about them. So it's like, here's what Morgan Stanley is doing. Here's what Mayo Clinic is doing. I'm using their language. I'm talking about Susan does this. And everyone's like, he talked to Susan?
Right.
How do you know Smiley knows Susan? She's been there for 25 years.
Oh, you're the one person that talked to Susan. You're that guy.
Wait, you talked to Mark in HR? Like, oh man, Mark in HR. And I'm like bringing those in, and those names, the acronyms, like, oh yeah, when we did, the annual summit in Nashville, and people are like, how does he know about the summit in Nashville? How does he know about the TTT strategy? Like, for the future strategy? Like, I'm like, yeah, so I'm bringing in their language, their ideas, their verbiage, their strategy, their goals, and what's working with them when it comes to connection and engagement. And so it gives me a sense of buy-in, and it allows me to really connect on a deeper level with the audience. And to my fellow speakers out there, this does not take that much time.
No.
Like, this is not months and months of work. Like, you're getting on a couple calls. I think you owe that to your client to do that prep. And for me, that has been so valuable that I brought that into my practice. And I think it's the single biggest thing that audience members say to me after. It's like, it really meant so much that you talked to us, and this felt like it was about us.
Yeah. Well, and on a practical sense, you're able to inhabit and really get on the ground, on their court, jargon, language, initiatives, what they grapple with, how they phrase it. And you're only using that to inform you so that you can take your distinctions in your work and your body of life, of career, and be able to really tailor it in a way. So it's brilliant. I see more speakers doing it. I encourage even more speakers to do it. I think that is a distinguishing factor for you. I know I have one particular client you spoke with up in Oregon, talking about the
Yep.
Oregon Trail, and they just raved about you. And I know you strike me as the kind of person that people love, but it's not by accident, Smiley. And on the same note, at some point, I have to make this about me, young man. But when I work with my clients and speakers, we set up these calls, some more than others, right? I like to be on the call for a couple of reasons. First of all, if there's anything that needs to be safeguarded or intervened on, whether it's on the buyer side or the speaker side, there might be some overreaching or something, I'd like to be there so that I can be that guide, if you will. Rarely happens in 20 years. I don't think anything crazy has ever happened on a call, but I'm always aware that the possibility is there, a possible misunderstanding. Somebody assumes something, and he's going to be doing 3 days of speaking, and it was only 33 minutes or something like that. I digress. But what's important for me is if the speaker, in this case you, is on the call and you start asking some questions, maybe some very pointed questions, I get to learn how you operate. And I get to learn how you're digging in and how you're capturing what's important to you as you craft your tailored speech. And my buyer, I get to inhabit and understand what is more important to them on a deeper level than I already do. So not only for the one that you're working on that call, but in the future, I now have a history where I have a deeper understanding and I can serve them better. And that's part of my process, which I feel is kind of similar to what you're doing in the case of, getting people on the call there.
And that's rare. Can I just say that, Seth? Like I work, as you know, I'm a non-exclusive speaker. So I work with a lot of different agents and bureaus. And I am shocked at how many don't show up to the pre-calls.
Yeah.
They might have someone on their team. And that's really interesting. I mean, I'm fine with it. I understand that folks are busy or they have other priorities. But I'm like, oh, wow, this is your client. And it's not just, I'm sure that you might have other speakers for this same event. So something that came up from Smiley's conversation is relevant to another speaker or
Right.
for next year or for their mid-annual meeting. And you can have that through line of, remember when you and Smiley were talking about that initiative, like, should we follow up on that with this speaker? And then also, I know this is really important to you. You show up at the events a lot.
Yeah.
So you're building the relationships, you can, which is better because then your clients better, what they do, how they run their events, and your speakers better because their content and their style and what sets them apart, so you can sell them better, which just makes you better at your business.
Thank you. And I love going for those very reasons, and also some low-hanging fruit. Some of my clients are punching above their weight and they have a kind of a Spartan team. So if I can show up and do the dishes, metaphorically speaking, or get you mic'd up or whatever it may be, or run and go get the USB driver, whatever it is, I can intervene and have support as well, or remind you that they don't refer to the attendees as customers, they're members, or whatever it is, and you're like, I know, Seth, you told me 26 times. Thank you for telling me the 27th time, but that it's important to them. And, I can be that hammer, if you will. This has been great. We're almost out of time. Leave us with either what you're working on right now that most excites you, or what you see on the horizon that you feel is important for our audience, and our viewers and our subscribers.
Yeah, a couple things. One of the things that I'm tracking a lot is really kind of how we navigate human connection in the world of AI. And I think that is, to me, this is one of, if not the biggest challenge for not only companies in the corporate world, but frankly, just in terms of culture and society today. So that is not to say like we're going backwards of no technology, AI is bad, Luddites, like put away your phone. It's just not realistic for the average person. That's not where we're going. But at the same time, I think we need to have more guardrails and intentions behind how we're using these tools, how we're rolling them out, how we're talking about AI at our companies, so that people feel like their threat of them losing their job isn't there. And also that they know how to do their job better and save time so that they have more time for human connection. So this is something that I think about a lot, that I think is really important, because I know that most companies have had or will have an AI speaker, or many, which is great. How do we use these tools? How is AI going to change accounting, advisory, financial services, healthcare, real estate, whatever it is? But I think less folks have thought about, how do we build design for human connection in the world of AI, where people in their palm of their hands have access to pretty much everything ever written, right? There's, ChatGPT just released their research portal, which I don't know if you've seen. This is stuff that it would normally take, somebody months to come up with, like all their research for a PhD or a thesis or something. You can get it in like 5 minutes. It's incredible.
Wow.
How does this change how we think about human connection and our people and leading our people in these kind of really tumultuous and overwhelming times?
Sounds like another podcast in my mind.
That's true. It does.
Or hold on, I'll be back. I'm going to go do my PhD. I only need 5 minutes. Just kidding.
Yeah,
Just kidding.
exactly.
Something like that. Well, listen, Smiley, thank you, for not only taking care of my clients, but all the people that you've been serving and the difference that you make, but more importantly, the difference that you're going to make on those that you have yet to contribute to and present to. Hands down, not sounding Pollyanna and blowing smoke up, where people love you. People love when you present. For our audience who are, business owners, event planners, conference planners, meeting professionals, and everybody in that whole ecosystem, reach out. Let's get you connected with Smiley for your event. Great content, the perfect balance of some real ideas that make a difference that can be applied immediately, and fun, good humor, connection, some inspiring, some lighting that spark into the room. So it's kind of like the right doses of what we need today. And thank you for being here and taking your time to do this with us, Smiley. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Seth. I really appreciate you.
You got it. And to our audience, again, join us, subscribe, like us, love us, comment. If you love this kind of content, please come back. Thanks so much for being with us. We'll see you next time.